We grow up hearing certain things about money so often from people we trust completely that we never stop to question whether they're actually true. A parent repeats something their own parent told them. A teacher shares a well-meaning rule of thumb. None of these people were lying to you deliberately. Most were simply repeating what they'd absorbed decades earlier. Here are 8 lies about money you were probably taught as a child and what they've actually cost you. Lie number 1, money is the root of all evil. This phrase gets repeated so casually it feels like established fact. What most people don't realize is that it's actually a misquote, and even in its original form it was never really about money itself. Money is a neutral tool, capable of funding a hospital, a school, a meal for a hungry family, exactly as easily as it could fund something harmful. The moral weight lives in the choices made with that tool, not the tool itself. Believing money carries some inherent evil creates a subtle, lifelong discomfort around earning it. Negotiating a salary starts to feel slightly grasping, even when it's completely reasonable. Pursuing financial growth starts to feel vaguely inappropriate. This discomfort rarely gets named directly. It shows up as hesitation, undervaluing your own work, accepting less than you're worth. The real cost is every raise never asked for, every investment opportunity passed over because pursuing growth felt like it conflicted with being a good person. Money was never the problem. The problem was inheriting a belief that treated wanting more of a neutral tool as a character flaw. Lie number 2, rich people are greedy. This lie targets a related belief, that wealth itself is evidence of poor character. Examined honestly, this doesn't hold up. Wealthy people display the exact same range of character as people at any income level. Some are extraordinarily generous, some are self-interested. This range exists identically among people with modest incomes too. What makes this lie damaging isn't that it's occasionally wrong about one person, it's that it creates unconscious resistance to becoming wealthy yourself. If greed and wealth are taught as synonymous, pursuing wealth starts to feel like pursuing a corrupted version of yourself. The actual cost compounds over years. Someone carrying this belief tends to self-sabotage financial progress in small, almost invisible ways, staying smaller than their actual capability because some part of them associates financial growth with moral decline. Character isn't measured in dollars, it's measured in choices, and wealth simply expands the range of choices available, for better or worse, depending entirely on the person making them. Lie number 3, a safe job is the smart choice. Safety and intelligence get taught as interchangeable when they're actually separate qualities that sometimes align and sometimes don't. A single, stable paycheck genuinely feels safe, but this feeling obscures a specific risk: complete dependency on one employer, one industry, one set of circumstances remaining stable indefinitely. The real cost is concentration risk most people were never taught to consider. An investment portfolio concentrated in one stock is widely understood as risky, yet an entire income concentrated in one employer rarely gets evaluated through that same lens, despite carrying an almost identical structural risk. A layoff or industry downturn can eliminate that single income source with little warning. This doesn't mean every stable job is a mistake. It means safety and smart aren't automatically the same decision, and treating them as identical closes off consideration of income diversification that could provide genuine long-term security. The smartest decision usually isn't the single safest option. It's the one that genuinely accounts for the risk safety itself sometimes conceals. Lie number 4, save every penny you can. Saving is genuinely good advice, as far as it goes. The problem isn't that saving is bad, it's that it was taught as the complete strategy, the finish line, rather than the first step meant to be followed by a second step that rarely gets equal emphasis. A dollar sitting in a low-yield savings account is safe, but it's also barely growing, often losing real value once inflation is factored in. The same dollar invested wisely has real potential to compound over time. Someone taught that maximizing a savings balance represents the pinnacle of financial responsibility often ends up with a large amount saved, decades later worth considerably less in real terms than it would have been had a meaningful portion been invested instead. The real cost is decades of missed compounding, an entire category of wealth building that never entered the picture because saving was presented as the whole strategy rather than the necessary first half of one. This gap isn't modest, it's often measured in multiples, an entire category of wealth left unrealized simply because nobody explained that saving and investing are two different steps. Lie number 5. Debt is always bad. Of all 8 lies, this one may cause the most direct financial harm because it prevents a distinction that actually matters. Not all debt carries the same risk. High-interest credit card debt, often above 20%, is genuinely dangerous. A reasonable low-interest mortgage financing an appreciating asset operates on completely different terms, terms that can build wealth rather than erode it. Someone taught that debt itself is inherently bad often avoids genuinely useful financial tools out of fear that was never specific to their situation. A reasonable mortgage gets avoided in favor of renting indefinitely, paying someone else's mortgage instead of building their own equity, simply because debt in any form was taught as something to avoid at nearly any cost. The actual skill worth developing isn't blanket avoidance, it's understanding the difference between debt that finances a depreciating expense and debt that finances an appreciating or income-generating asset. This distinction changes an enormous number of decisions for the better, decisions a blanket debt is bad rule would have blocked entirely. Lie number 6, you need a degree to be successful. A degree can genuinely open doors, and this isn't an argument against education. The problem is narrower. Treating a degree as the only legitimate path dismisses skill-based alternatives that frequently lead to identical or better financial outcomes, often faster and with dramatically less debt. The real cost operates in 2 directions. First, the direct debt carried by people who pursued a degree specifically because they were taught it was the only path for a credential that didn't translate into proportionally higher earnings. Second, the cost carried by people whose genuine skills pointed toward a trade or specialized skill, but who never seriously considered it because it wasn't presented as a legitimate, equally valid choice. What actually determines income is considerably more tied to skill and market demand than to the specific credential attached to it. This doesn't diminish education's genuine value. It means the blanket rule closed off paths that for many people would have been faster and more financially sound routes to the same destination. Lie number 7, buy a home as soon as you can. Home ownership genuinely can build wealth. The problem isn't that it's bad advice, it's treating it as a universal automatic rule regardless of market conditions or individual circumstances. Renting, combined with deliberately investing the difference, can outperform home ownership equity in many real market conditions, particularly in expensive housing markets. The real cost is skipping that comparison entirely, buying reflexively because it was presented as the responsible milestone, rather than running actual numbers specific to your own market. Neither renting nor owning is universally correct. The lie was never about which choice is better. It was about skipping the comparison entirely. Lie number 8. Talking about money is rude. This may be the most quietly damaging lie of all because its cost is almost entirely invisible. A whole category of helpful information and support that never arrived because the topic itself was taught to be off limits. Negotiating a salary requires talking openly about money. Asking a mentor for financial guidance requires the same openness. Stating a financial boundary honestly in a social situation becomes harder for anyone carrying this inherited discomfort. The real cost compounds silently across a lifetime of decisions made in isolation, without the support that would be completely normal in almost any other area of life. 8 lies, each one taught by people who genuinely believed they were protecting you, passing along wisdom exactly as it had been passed to them. None of this is really about blame. Most of the people who taught you these things were simply repeating a pattern that had continued, largely unexamined, for generations before either of you were born. Let's return to all 8 one final time. Money isn't evil, it's a neutral tool. Wealth doesn't determine character, choices do. A safe job isn't automatically the smart choice. since safety and intelligence aren't the same thing. Saving alone was never the complete strategy, only the necessary first step before investing. Not all debt is equally dangerous, and treating it that way closes off genuinely useful financial tools. A degree isn't the only legitimate path to success, since skill and market demand matter more than the credential attached to them. Homeownership isn't automatically correct either. The math depends entirely on your specific market and circumstances. And silence around money protects nobody. It simply removes the conversations that would have helped you avoid mistakes in the first place. The real value in recognizing these 8 lies isn't resentment toward where they came from. It's permission, finally, to question them directly, to run your own actual numbers rather than defaulting to an inherited rule, to have the honest conversations about money that silence never allowed, and to make financial decisions based on your specific circumstances, rather than a blanket belief nobody ever stopped to genuinely examine. Here's a practical way to actually use everything covered in this video. Pick just one of these 8 lies, the one that felt most familiar, most uncomfortable to hear described out loud. Write down the specific belief exactly as you were taught it. Then write down, honestly, what it may have already cost you, and what questioning it starting today might actually open up instead. This single exercise, done seriously for even one belief, tends to be more useful than trying to overhaul your entire financial mindset all at once. If even a few of these 8 hit closer to home than you expected walking in, that's exactly the point of making this video. Subscribe to Mr. Net Worth for daily videos on money psychology, saving, and building real wealth. No jargon, just what actually works. 8 lies, each one taught by people who genuinely believed they were protecting you, passing along wisdom exactly as it had been passed to them. None of this is really about blame. Most of the people who taught you these things were simply repeating a pattern that had continued, largely unexamined, for generations before either of you were born. Let's return to all 8 of these one final time. Money isn't evil. It's a neutral tool, capable of funding a hospital exactly as easily as it could fund something harmful, and the moral weight lives entirely in the choices made with it. Wealth doesn't determine character. Rich people display the exact same range of generosity and self-interest as people at any income level, and character is measured in choices, never in a number sitting in a bank account. A safe job isn't automatically the smart choice, because safety and intelligence were never actually the same quality. A single income source, however stable it feels today, represents a genuine concentration risk that deserves honest consideration. Saving alone was never the complete strategy. It was always meant to be the first step, followed by investing, and treating it as the entire finish line costs decades of compounding that never had the chance to happen. Not all debt is equally dangerous, and collapsing every form of debt into one blanket category closes off genuinely useful financial tools. A degree isn't the only legitimate path to success, since skill and market demand tend to determine income considerably more reliably than the specific credential attached to that skill ever does. Homeownership isn't automatically the correct choice either, and treating it as a universal rule skips over real math that depends entirely on your specific market and timeline. And silence around money protects nobody. It simply removes the conversations, the negotiations, and the honest boundaries that would have helped you avoid mistakes in nearly every other area of financial life. The real value in recognizing these 8 lies isn't resentment toward where they came from. It's permission finally to question them directly, to run your own actual numbers rather than defaulting to an inherited rule, and to make financial decisions based on your specific circumstances rather than a blanket belief nobody ever examined. Here's a practical way to actually use everything covered in this video. Pick just one of these 8 lies, the one that felt most familiar or most uncomfortable to hear described out loud. Write down the exact belief as you were originally taught it. Then write down, honestly, what that belief may have already cost you in real decisions and real opportunities that quietly pass by because of it. Then, and this is the part most people skip, write down what questioning that belief, starting today, might actually open up instead. Not a vague intention to think about it differently someday, but a specific concrete decision you could genuinely make differently, starting right now. This single exercise, done seriously for even one belief, tends to matter more than trying to overhaul your entire financial mindset all at once. Real change tends to happen one examined belief at a time. None of the people who taught you these 8 lies did so with any intention of holding you back. They were doing exactly what most people do with inherited beliefs, passing them forward unchanged, trusting that what worked for one generation would continue working for the next. Examining an inherited idea honestly and choosing to set it aside once it no longer serves you isn't a rejection of the people who taught it. If even a few of these 8 hit closer to home than you expected, that's exactly the point of making this video. Subscribe to Mr. Net Worth for daily videos on money psychology, saving and building real wealth. No jargon, just what actually works. If even a few of these 8 lies hit closer to home than you expected walking into this video, that's exactly the point of making it. The real value here isn't resentment toward the people who taught you these things. Most of them were simply repeating what they'd absorbed themselves decades earlier without ever stopping to question it. The value is permission, finally, to question these beliefs yourself, to run your own actual numbers instead of defaulting to an inherited rule, and to make financial decisions based on your specific circumstances, rather than a blanket belief nobody ever examined closely. Here's one simple way to actually use this. Pick just one of these 8 lies, the one that felt most familiar or most uncomfortable to hear out loud. Write down exactly what you were taught and what questioning it, starting today, might actually open up for you instead. Subscribe to Mr. Net Worth for daily videos on money psychology, saving and building real wealth. No jargon, just what actually works. That's all 8, laid out plainly. None of them were malicious. All of them shaped decisions you probably never questioned until right now. The real work starts after this video ends. Pick the one belief that felt most familiar, sit with it honestly, and choose differently the next time it shows up in your own life. Not because someone told you to, but because you finally looked at it clearly for yourself.